Residents of Santa Claus, Danny and Kim Daniels, were known throughout their community as a warm and generous couple who always had a welcoming smile for everyone. Proud parents to four biological children, including Jessica, Bryant, and Amber Daniels, Danny and Kim also opened their home to several foster children, providing a nurturing environment for them to thrive. Tragically, the community was unaware that this display of kindness would one day lead to their shocking and horrific demise. Kimberly, known simply as Kim to her loved ones, was born on February 25, 1964, in Georgia, USA. Details about her early life are scarce, but we know she grew up in a large, highly dysfunctional family. Kim faced many challenges from a young age. She became an orphan in her early teens and spent her remaining youth moving from one foster home to another. When Kim turned 18 and aged out of the foster care system, life didn't get any easier. She had 3 children with a man whose identity remains undisclosed. Her first child, Amber, was born around 1986 or 1987 when Kim was in her 20s. Then, in January 1989, she welcomed twins Bryant and Brooke. Unfortunately, Kim's troubled childhood took its toll, and her struggles with drug and alcohol addiction led to her losing custody of her children. After hitting rock bottom and being forced to live in her car, Kim decided it was time for a change. In 1992, she joined Alcoholics Anonymous, where she met Danny Daniels. Danny was born on May 21, 1950, and worked for the United States Postal Service. Danny helped Kim overcome her addiction, and their relationship blossomed into love. They married shortly after, and with the stability of their marriage, Kim regained custody of her 3 children. The Daniels family was now complete with Kim, her children Amber, Bryant, Brooke, Danny, and Jessica, a daughter Danny had previously adopted. They moved into a charming brick house in the quaint town of Santa Claus, Georgia, a place with a population of just around 300 known for its Christmas theme. The town's main attraction was its festive spirit, with everything inspired by the legendary figure of Santa Claus. The local chapel was open 24/7, featuring a walking trail in Santa's garden. During the holiday season, residents sent over 1,000 letters and postcards through a large red mailbox labeled as Santa's Mail, located on December 25th Avenue. Other street names in the town were similarly themed, like Slay Street and Rudolph Road. The town sign featured a drawing of Santa Claus and the phrase, "The town that loves children," written in beautiful script. The Daniels home boasted a huge fireplace and was nestled between 2 railroad ponds, surrounded by tall pines and vineyards. The Daniels family settled into their new home without any trouble and quickly became devoted members of the Pentecostal church. Kim played the piano and sang in the choir during religious services, while Danny taught Sunday school. Their kids attended the local school. To those who knew them, they epitomized the perfect family: a beautiful home, 4 children, 2 dogs, a mother dedicated to her family and community, and a father who worked hard for the well-being of his loved ones. Kim and Danny's kindness seemed to know no bounds. By the mid-90s, they had opened their doors as a foster home for children in need. Having experienced the hardships of being homeless herself, Kim felt this was a natural step, and Danny's familiarity with the adoption system made it seem like the logical choice. Over the next few years, social service workers noted that the Daniels took in about 7 children, though some sources suggested the number was much higher. One of the children they took in 1995, was a 10-year-old girl named Joanne. She was placed with the Daniels due to her toxic family environment. Both Joanne's father and stepfather were alcoholics. Various child protection service workers reported that her mother practiced black magic and voodoo. Joanne had an older brother named Jerry Scott Heidler. Born on June 9, 1977, Jerry was described as a kind young man who got along well with children. However, he faced challenges due to his difficult home life. During his high school years, he attended a school for students with emotional and behavioral disorders, and he had a criminal record for stealing from a store and a vehicle. By 1996, he was facing serious charges in the town of Alma and was on probation for driving under the influence. While Joanne was under Kim and Danny's care, Jerry often visited the family home to see her, sometimes even staying overnight. After Joanne returned to her family, Jerry continued to maintain a relationship with the Daniels. Kim and Danny wanted to help him, so they occasionally brought him along to church. This continued for over a year, but by 1997, Danny started noticing that Jerry, then 20 years old, seemed to have a particularly close relationship with his 16-year-old daughter Jessica, and he wasn't the only one who noticed. Concerned for his daughter's welfare, Danny decided to confront Jerry. He spoke to him seriously, and after this conversation, Jerry no longer visited the Daniels' home or accompanied them to church. In December of that same year, the Daniels were getting ready to celebrate the holiday season. Christmas was Kim's favorite time of the year, a sentiment deeply rooted in her own experiences of spending many Christmas Eves alone during her years in foster care. Because of this, she went out of her way to create the best possible Christmas experience for every child in her home, both her own kids and those temporarily under her care. She spent a good part of the year collecting gifts, which she stored in the attic of the house. This year, the room was packed with toys, video games, movies, and clothes. The holiday decorations began early in December, and by the time the tree was up, it was surrounded by dozens of presents. On the night of December 3, 1997, the Daniels family went to bed after a day like any other. At that time, in addition to their 4 children, they were caring for 3 more foster kids: Amanda, age 9, Corey, age 4, and Gabriel, who was just 10 months old. The 2 older children had been with the Daniels for several years, and the baby had been in their care since his birth. It was clear the Daniels had grown deeply attached to these kids and were even considering officially adopting them. Sadly, they would never have the chance to fulfill this wish and give these children a permanent home. While the Daniels had started December ready to enjoy the festive season, Jerry was experiencing a completely different situation. On that same December 3rd, he attended the funeral of a baby belonging to a friend of Jerry's named Mary. Around the same time that Danny had forbidden Jerry from getting close to Jessica, Mary had become pregnant. Tragically, 6 months later, she lost the baby. While it was never confirmed whether Jerry was the father or not, the funeral was nonetheless a painful event. After the ceremony, Jerry drowned his sorrows in alcohol at a local bar, where he also played pool for a while. Several hours later, in the early hours of December 4th, Jerry stole a black van from his neighbor and drove to the Daniels' home. The family was completely asleep when Jerry entered the house through a bathroom window. He then headed straight to Kim and Danny's bedroom, where, due to his many previous visits, he was familiar with the layout of the room and knew where the gun cabinet was located. Jerry grabbed a semi-automatic shotgun and loaded it. He then walked out to the back door of the house, holding the gun in one hand, and proceeded to smoke a cigarette before re-entering the house. The sequence of what happened next remains somewhat unclear, as Jerry's own statements did not align with what was later reported during the trial. According to Jerry, he first entered the room where Brian, one of Kim's biological sons, was sleeping. Without the 8-year-old boy even realizing what was happening, Jerry pointed the rifle at his head and fired. Bryant died instantly. The gunshot woke Jessica, who saw Jerry in the room with the weapon and immediately ran out. Jerry chased her and shot her in the back of the neck just as she entered her parents' bedroom, likely seeking help. Jerry then turned the gun on Kim and Danny, who were still in their bed. The shot aimed at Danny was not very effective, and Danny raised his arms in an attempt to protect himself. Jerry reloaded the rifle and fired 4 more times at Danny, ultimately ending his life. Although this was the sequence of events Jerry later confessed to, court documents suggest that the first victims were actually Kim and Danny. Jessica was awakened by the loud noise of the gunshots, and then came the tragic end of young Bryant. Regardless of the exact sequence, the harsh reality was that Jerry had cold-bloodedly taken 4 lives without any apparent reason. However, Jerry's criminal actions that night were not yet over. 5 more children remained alive in the house: Amber, Brooke, Amanda, Corey, and Gabriel. Some reports mention that Jerry's sister Joanne was with the Daniels at the time of the attack, but court documents clarify that she had not been in the house since her foster care stay in 1995. Jerry went to the room where the 3 girls were sleeping. He told them that a man had broken into the house and that Kim had asked him to take them to safety. The girls, who knew and trusted Jerry, believed him and followed him to the van. Gabriel, the baby, just 10 months old, and Corey, the 4-year-old, were left behind in the house with the bodies of their parents and siblings. Jerry then drove the 3 girls about 15 miles to the Altamaha River. He parked in a secluded area under a bridge and proceeded to sexually abuse 10-year-old Amber. It was not entirely clear if Brooke and Amanda witnessed this heinous attack. After raping the little girl, Jerry threw the gun into the river and continued driving with the 3 girls about 72 miles away from the Daniels residence. After committing these horrific crimes, Jerry dropped the girls off the vehicle and left them abandoned on a dirt road. He then returned to his mother's house in the town of Alma, where he spent the next few hours sleeping and playing video games with his brother as if nothing had happened. At one point, Jerry asked his brother if he had ever killed someone. Upon receiving a no as an answer, Jerry remarked that doing so made him want to go out and harm more people. While Jerry was living out his twisted fantasies without any apparent remorse, the 3 young girls he had abandoned were walking terrified and shivering through the dirt streets, their nightgowns the only protection against the cold. Around 4 a.m., a local hero and his wife were alerted by their dog's incessant barking. Looking out the window, they saw the 3 defenseless girls in the street, immediately took them in, and called the police. The authorities arrived within minutes. Although the girls were in shock, they were coherent enough to tell the police they had been kidnapped from their home in Santa Claus, providing their address. 2 officers were dispatched to the Daniels residence. They arrived at the brick house around 5:10 a.m. on that December 4th. From the street, the silence of the house created a chilling atmosphere. The front door was open, and when no one answered their calls, the officers checked the windows and saw the arm of a young child on the top bunk of a bunk bed. They loudly announced their presence before entering the Daniels residence. With all the lights off and the winter sky still dark, the house was shrouded in shadows. As they moved through the rooms using their flashlights, the officers stumbled upon the horrifying scene of young Bryant, still clutching his teddy bear, his head covered in blood. In the background, they could hear a clock alarm and the cries of a baby. It was Gabriel, found in his crib in Kim and Danny's room. There, the police also discovered the body of Jessica, lying between the hallway and the door, and in the bed, Kim and Danny were found deceased. Corey was found hiding under a table in the kitchen, visibly terrified. The officers also noticed that the gun closet was open. The residence was declared a crime scene, and more investigators soon arrived. Suddenly, Santa Claus, a town where everyone knew each other and which prided itself on being the town that loves children, became the center of a quadruple murder and the abduction of 3 minors. This drew a rapid influx of journalists. The county prosecutor told the press that while the motive for the attack was not yet clear, it was not believed to be random. They were almost certain that the perpetrator was a friend of the Daniels, or at least someone who knew them. The scene was meticulously photographed and videotaped. Forensic technicians collected samples, vacuumed for traces of hair fibers and clothing, and found shotgun shells scattered throughout the house. There were 2 near Jessica, one in the main bathroom, another in Kim and Danny's bedroom, one in the laundry room, one in Bryant's room, and another near the sofa in the living room. A neighbor reported hearing strange noises around 1:45 a.m., but given the large distance between the houses and the general quiet of the area, did not think they could be gunshots. According to the coroner who responded to the case, Kim had received 2 shots in the stomach and arm. Danny had 4 wounds on his body and 1 in the head, which was fatal. Jessica died from a single shot in the neck, as did Bryant in the head. Although the deaths of the 2 children were instantaneous, the coroner mentioned it was possible that the 2 adults may have lingered a bit longer before dying. A cigarette butt was also found crushed against the floor near the back door. From the bathroom window, a fingerprint was collected, and these 2 pieces of evidence would help identify the perpetrator of the brutal crime. However, what the forensics team did not yet know was that over 25 miles away, at another police station, the 3 girls had already identified the culprit. Amber, Brooke, and Amanda had described the van, and authorities quickly distributed bulletins with all the relevant information, noting that the suspect might be armed and dangerous. The eldest of the 3 girls, Amber, was taken to an interrogation room where a police officer showed her a series of photographs and asked if she recognized anyone. Without hesitation, Amber pointed to Jerry. The other girls also identified him. When the police asked Amber if Jerry had harmed any of the 3, she broke down and started crying inconsolably. It wasn't until a worker from the Department of Children and Family Services was called that the young victim was able to recount what had happened without any other officers present. The story of sexual abuse was corroborated by evidence of physical trauma found on Amber's body. This, combined with DNA evidence found at the scene that matched Jerry, made him the primary and only suspect in the heinous crime. Uniformed patrol officers were deployed throughout the county, where Jerry was last seen, and also in Alma, where his family lived. The search was brief and straightforward. 2 officers were sent to Jerry's family residence. Behind the house, they located the van, and as the patrol car stopped in front of the residence, Jerry was seen exiting the front door. Seeing the 2 agents, he ran back inside the house. The officers pursued him while calling for backup over the radio. Jerry's brother came out and claimed he was the only one at home at that moment, which was clearly a lie. Soon, Bacon County detectives arrived as reinforcements and started a thorough search of the property. Jerry had hidden in a crawl space under the house. When he refused to come out, 2 officers dragged him out and arrested him on an outstanding warrant for violating his parole. Jerry's brother was arrested for obstructing justice, and both were jailed without bail. Despite resisting arrest, once at the station, Jerry confessed to committing the crimes. He recounted what happened that night and admitted to disposing of the weapon in the river, which was confirmed by the young victims. The motive was never definitively established. Jerry himself said he did not know why he had done it. Some speculated that the attack was a result of Danny forbidding him from seeing Jessica, while others believed it might have been related to the grief over losing Mary's baby, who was likely Jerry's child. In his statement, Jerry said he remembered the events as if he had been in a dream. Jerry's entire confession, which included the kidnapping of the 3 girls and the abuse of Amber, was recorded on video. On December 8, 1997, just weeks before Christmas, funeral services for the 4 victims were held. After the ceremony, Danny, Kim, Jessica, and Bryant were laid to rest side by side. Although the evidence was more than sufficient, and Jerry had confessed to his crimes when it came time to plead at the trial, he remained silent. Without a plea of guilty or innocent, the court clerk automatically entered a plea of not guilty on his behalf. As a result, a trial had to proceed, which was not scheduled until mid-1999. On July 6th of that year, while waiting for his trial to begin, Jerry managed to escape from his cell by sawing through the bars of his window. He was on the run for 12 hours before being recaptured and returned to jail. During a search of his cell, authorities found 75 homemade weapons and learned that he often threatened guards and other inmates. After this incident, his trial finally started on August 30th, 1999. The prosecution presented videos and photographs of the crime scene showing the condition in which the victims were found. Jerry kept his head down, refusing to look at the outcome of his actions. They also played the video of Amber's testimony, recounting everything that happened that tragic morning. Her words brought tears to the eyes of the Daniels' relatives and friends present, and even some jury members were moved. Additionally, Jerry's recorded confession was played, and the 2 officers who conducted the interrogation testified about his statements. Forensic doctors who examined the bodies testified about the number of gunshot wounds each family member received and the estimated time of death for each. A firearms expert testified that the shotgun used in the attack had a capacity for only 6 cartridges, indicating that the perpetrator must have reloaded at least once, given the number of wounds and cartridges found at the scene. The prosecutor suggested several possible motives for the murders, with the main hypothesis being that Jerry was angry over being prohibited from seeing Jessica. The defense, on the other hand, pleaded guilty but requested a verdict of insanity to avoid the death penalty. As part of this strategy, 3 court-appointed experts were required to examine the accused's mental state before the trial. During the trial, the court allowed, despite the prosecution's objections, 3 doctors who had interviewed Jerry to testify as witnesses regarding his mental health. The 3 appointed experts testified that the defendant did not suffer from any mental retardation, and his IQ was in the lower average range. They diagnosed him with borderline personality disorder, possibly accompanied by antisocial personality disorder. However, they stated that Jerry had not shown signs of a psychotic break and was responsible for his actions. They added that the accused was a drug addict and could experience hallucinations during periods of use. They agreed that he had the mental capacity to stand trial and that there was sufficient clinical documentation to consider a guilty verdict, but not for mental illness. The first phase of the trial concluded with a unanimous verdict of guilt. The jury found Jerry guilty of 4 counts of murder with malice aforethought, 3 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of kidnapping causing bodily harm, 1 count of aggravated sodomy, 1 count of aggravated child sexual abuse, another of child abuse, and 1 of burglary. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution presented 5 witnesses to demonstrate that Jerry was an unstable and dangerous individual. The first was a police officer who testified about finding an iron bar hidden in the defendant's prison uniform during an inspection. Next, a guard from the detention center where Jerry had been incarcerated testified that he had heard Jerry say he had not finished collecting souls. A jailer from the same facility testified that the accused had tampered with the locks on his cell door and had fashioned a weapon with which he had threatened several prison officials. This testimony was corroborated by a jail administrator who added that Jerry had escaped from the center for 12 hours just days before the trial. Finally, A prosecutor from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation testified that he had received a taunting call from the accused while in prison, in which Jerry said that of the 9 little pigs, 4 were dead, referencing the Daniels. In response, the defense called Jerry's mother to the stand. She spoke about her son's upbringing and mental health, noting that his father was an alcoholic and she had left him when Jerry was 4 years old. Following her, Jerry's sister testified. Lisa also spoke about their childhood, detailing how their family frequently moved, their father and stepfather's excessive drinking, and the latter's verbal abuse. Additionally, the director of programs at the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice testified. He had managed Jerry's family's case and mentioned that Jerry had entered the juvenile justice system at 14 or 15 years old after a confrontation with his stepfather. William Wright, a social services worker, testified that he had been in contact with the family in 1985 and had noted that Jerry's mother showed little affection towards her son. Jerry's foster mother from August 1988 to March 1989 recalled that the 11-year-old Jerry was afraid of the dark and irrationally feared that a knife might fall from the ceiling and cut him. Another doctor contacted by the defense team to assess Jerry agreed with the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. On September 4, 1999, nearly 2 years after the gruesome murder of the 4 Daniels family members, the jury found aggravating circumstances and recommended the death penalty for each of the 4 counts of murder with malice aforethought. Jerry was also sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences for aggravated sodomy and kidnapping causing bodily harm, 30 consecutive years for aggravated child abuse, and 20 consecutive years for each of the remaining charges. After hearing his sentence, Jerry cried, showing emotion for the first time. The judge followed the jury's recommendation and sentenced 22-year-old Jerry to death by electric chair. The sentence was automatically appealed according to state laws, but was upheld by the Supreme Court of Georgia. Since then, Jerry has continued to appeal his case multiple times. He argues that his trial attorney was ineffective in investigating and presenting evidence regarding his mental health during the guilt phase of his trial. However, an internal investigation revealed that the defense team had exhausted all available avenues to secure a life sentence for Jerry, despite encountering numerous obstacles during the case construction. In 2001, the Supreme Court of the United States denied Jerry's request for a procedure used by higher courts to correct an error made by a lower court. The most recent appeal was made in 2023. Like all previous instances, the request was denied and the sentence was reaffirmed. As of the date of this video, Jerry is being held in the Georgia State Prison. Despite the years that have passed, the terrible events of that December morning in 1997 remain vivid in the memory of the residents of Santa Claus, a peaceful and picturesque town that loves Christmas. And there you have it. That concludes today's case. Join me next time as we delve into the details of another unreal true crime. Goodbye.